If you were to secure a window seat on a night flight tracing the eastern edge of the Asian continent, flying south from the snowy northern tip of Hokkaido, drifting down across the Japanese archipelago, and eventually approaching the equator to land at the tip of the Malay Peninsula, you would be looking down upon the most compelling economic story of the last century. From 35,000 feet, the view is dominated by vast, glowing clusters of artificial light. To the north, the Greater Tokyo area appears as a sprawling, endless ocean of neon, a single metropolitan organism that houses 37 million people. To the south lies the concentrated, blazing pinprick of Singapore, a city-state that packs more accumulated capital per square mile than perhaps anywhere else on Earth. For 50 years, these lights have told a singular story: the Asian miracle. It is the narrative of how two nations with practically no natural resources managed to industrialize at breakneck speed. They turned rice paddies into semiconductor foundries and fishing villages into global financial hubs. By almost every aggregate statistic available to the World Bank or the IMF, Japan and Singapore have won the game of capitalism. They boast infrastructure that makes Western cities look archaic, crime rates that are statistical rounding errors, and currencies that serve as regional anchors and stores of value. But aggregate statistics are a mirage. They smooth over the jagged edges of reality. If you were to descend from that cruising altitude and walk into the living rooms of the citizens living under those lights, you would find a profound and persistent dichotomy that the GDP charts simply do not capture. You would find a silence that exists between the numbers. It is a story of deep, structural financial anxiety. This is the tale of two wallets. It is an investigation into the divergence between two of the world's most sophisticated financial ecosystems. On one side, we have Singapore, a city-state that has engineered a population of asset-rich, cash-poor citizens, millionaires on paper who own valuable property and massive pension balances, yet who often struggle to find the liquid cash to buy a simple meal. On the other side, we have Japan, a nation trapped in a cash-rich, yield-poor cycle. A population sitting on a mountain of liquid currency so vast it is nearly double the size of Germany's entire economy, yet paralyzed by a generational trauma that prevents them from spending it. To understand why a Singaporean retiree with $1 million home might be driving a private hire car to survive, and why a Japanese retiree with $500,000 in the bank refuses to turn on the heater in winter, we have to dismantle the machinery of these economies. We have to look at the forced savings of the Central Provident Fund, the frozen cash of the Japanese Post Bank, and the historic policy pivots occurring in 2024 and 2025 that are attempting to rewire the financial psychology of a continent. In the modern world, we define wealth by a single simplified number: net worth. You take the total market value of everything an individual owns, their house, their car, their stocks, their cash, and subtract everything they owe. The number left over is their score in the game of capitalism. By this metric, the average Singaporean and Japanese households are titans. In Singapore, the average wealth per adult consistently ranks in the global top 5. In Japan, the sheer volume of household assets is enough to buy entire G7 nations. But net worth is a liar. Or at the very least, it obscures the most critical factor of daily survival: liquidity. Liquidity is the speed and ease with which an asset can be converted into cash to meet an immediate need without losing value. It is the difference between owning a rare painting that might take 6 months to sell and having a stack of banknotes in your pocket. One makes you rich on paper, the other allows you to buy groceries on Tuesday. It is in the composition of wealth, the specific ratio of liquid cash to illiquid assets, that the true story of financial anxiety in Asia reveals itself. If we were to dissect the balance sheet of a typical Singaporean family, we would see a fortress of assets. Their wealth is heavily, almost aggressively, weighted towards residential property and state-managed pension funds. Their liability-to-asset ratio is commendably low, meaning they don't have much bad debt. But the definition of liquid assets in Singapore often includes monies inside the Central Provident Fund, CPF, money that is technically theirs but practically inaccessible for daily consumption. This structure creates high solvency. They have the money, but incredibly low flexibility. They cannot touch it. Conversely, Japan suffers from cash hoarding. This is a behavior born of a deflationary mindset that has permeated the culture since the bubble burst in the 1990s. When prices are falling, cash becomes the best performing asset. This logic has led to a situation where cash and deposits continue to comprise over 54% of total household financial assets in Japan, idling in accounts that earn virtually zero interest rather than circulating in the economy. To understand the Singaporean wallet, you have to understand the founding ethos of the nation. When Singapore was expelled from Malaysia in 1965, it was a tiny island with no natural resources. The government, led by Lee Kuan Yew, concluded that the only way to survive was to create a population that had a literal stake in the country. Unlike Western welfare states where taxes fund defined benefit pensions, Singapore does not tax the current workforce to pay for the retired. In Singapore, you pay for yourself, but you don't have a choice. This is achieved through the Central Provident Fund, or CPF. It is arguably the most successful forced savings machine in human history. The system is mandatory for all citizens and permanent residents. It is funded by contributions from both employees and employers, calculated as a percentage of the monthly wage. As of January 1, 2025, the contribution rates remain substantial. For a typical worker aged 55 and below, the total contribution rate is a staggering 37% of wages. Let's pause on that number. 37%. Of this, 20% is deducted directly from the employee's gross salary. The employer contributes another 17%. This means that for every dollar of economic value a worker generates, a significant portion is immediately diverted away from their disposable income. Before the money even hits their commercial bank account, it is gone. It is funneled into a state-managed ecosystem. And this money is not fungible. It is siloed into 3 specific accounts. First, the ordinary account, OA, primarily for housing. It earns a base interest rate of 2.5%. This is the account that built the Singapore skyline. It is the money that allows Singaporeans to buy homes. Second, the special account, SA, strictly for old age retirement. Because the money is locked away for longer, it earns a higher interest rate, currently floor set at around 4%. Third, the MediSave account, reserved for healthcare expenses. To ensure that these contributions keep pace with wage inflation, the government is progressively raising the CPF monthly salary ceiling. Following the roadmap announced in 2023, the ceiling was raised to $6,800 in 2024, and on January 1, 2025, it hit 7,400 Singapore dollars. This policy effectively forces middle and high-income earners to save a larger absolute quantum of their salary. While this increases their long-term asset base, it simultaneously reduces their monthly disposable cash today, tightening the liquidity squeeze for the upper middle class. Any system with complex rules inevitably births strategies to exploit them. For years, financially savvy Singaporeans engaged in a strategy known as CPF shielding to maximize interest. To understand why the government crushed this strategy in 2025, we have to understand the mechanics of the retirement account. When a Singaporean turns 55, the CPF board creates a 4th account, the retirement account, RA. This is the bucket that will fund their future annuity. To fund this account up to the full retirement sum, the board transfers money first from the high-yield special account, SA, and then from the lower-yield ordinary account, OA. Since the SA earns 4% and the OA earns 2.5%, it is in the members' interest to keep money in the SA and fund the RA using the OA cash. To achieve this, members would shield their SA balance just before their 55th birthday by investing it in low-risk financial products, effectively emptying the account. When the system scanned the account to create the RA, it would see an empty SA and draw from the OA instead. Once the RA was formed, the member would liquidate the investments, returning the cash to the SA. They effectively arbitraged the system to keep high interest and high liquidity. However, the Singapore government views the CPF as a social safety net, not an investment bank. They viewed the shielding hack as a distortion. So, in a move to streamline the system, the government closed this loophole. As of early 2025, the special account is automatically closed for all members aged 55 and above. All savings in the SA are transferred to the retirement account up to the full retirement sum, leaving the remainder in the ordinary account. This policy shift eliminated the arbitrage opportunity overnight. It enforced a right siting of funds. Liquid money that can be withdrawn at any time is placed in the low-yield OA, while illiquid money dedicated to retirement income is locked in the RA. The shielding hack is effectively dead, creating a clearer but much more rigid distinction between liquid and illiquid wealth. The result of this highly engineered system is undeniably successful at generating high net worth. But it comes at the cost of creating what economists call the dead money dilemma. Vast sums are accumulated, but they cannot be touched. The primary mechanism for this liquidity drain is the interaction between the ordinary account and the property market. This is the engine of the asset-rich phenomenon. Approximately 800,000 homeowners use their CPF-OA savings to service their housing mortgages annually. In most countries, you buy a house with your net income. In Singapore, you buy a house with your forced savings. While this makes home ownership affordable in terms of immediate cash flow, it drains the ordinary account. This leaves less liquidity for other investments or emergencies and ties the individual's net worth heavily to a single leasehold asset. Furthermore, the government's focus on retirement adequacy has led to the escalation of the required retirement sums. To keep up with inflation and rising life expectancy, the government raised the Enhanced Retirement Sum, ERS, to 426,000 Singapore dollars in 2025. This is 4 times the basic retirement sum. This new ceiling allows members to commit more savings to the CPF life annuity scheme. For a member who sets aside the full ERS, the estimated monthly payout could exceed $3,300 for life. This is a robust safety net. It ensures that no Singaporean who follows the rules will starve in old age. But to achieve it, the individual must lock up nearly $500,000 of capital. That is capital that cannot be accessed as a lump sum to start a business or help a child buy a home. It reinforces the rich on paper, poor in pocket reality. Now, let us cross the ocean to Japan. If Singapore is a machine built to force investment, Japan is a vault built to preserve cash. The Japanese household presents a financial profile that is the inverse of the Singaporean model. As of late 2024, the financial assets held by Japanese households reached a record high of 2.286 quadrillion yen, approximately 15 trillion US dollars. The sheer scale of this wealth is staggering. It is larger than the GDP of any single country on Earth, save for the United States and China. Yet, over 50% of this sum is held in cash and deposits. This amounts to over 1,100 trillion yen sitting in low-yield bank accounts, or, quite literally, as physical cash stacked in home safes. By comparison, households in the United States hold only about 11% to 13% of their assets in cash. This divergence represents a massive opportunity cost. If that 1,100 trillion yen hoard were invested in a diversified global equity portfolio, returning a modest 5% annually, Japanese households would generate over 370 billion US dollars of additional wealth every year. Instead, earning near zero interest, this capital stagnates. The preference for liquidity is so extreme that the physical cash in circulation relative to GDP in Japan is nearly double that of other advanced economies, dragging down economic velocity. Why do Japanese families do this? Why do they hoard cash when the rest of the world invests? The answer lies in collective trauma. Specifically, the trauma of the asset bubble collapse in the early 1990s and the subsequent lost decades. To understand the Japanese wallet, you have to understand 1989. In 1989, the Imperial Palace grounds in Tokyo were rumored to be worth more than all the real estate in California combined. The Nikkei stock index was unstoppable. And then, it popped. Stock market values crashed, land prices plummeted, and unlike in the US in 2008, where the market recovered within a few years, the Japanese market stayed down. For nearly 3 decades, asset prices trended downwards or stagnated. In such a deflationary environment, the logic of investing is flipped. In an inflationary world, cash is trash. If you hold cash, inflation eats away its value. But in a deflationary world, cash is king. When prices fall, the purchasing power of money increases over time. Holding cash becomes a profitable strategy. Conversely, investing in assets like houses or stocks that are depreciating is a losing proposition. To combat this, the Bank of Japan implemented a zero interest rate policy, ZIRP, that lasted for decades. While intended to stimulate spending, it had a psychological side effect. It destroyed the incentive to save in yield-bearing banking instruments. For years, with bank deposits earning near zero interest, often 0.001%, there was no penalty for keeping cash at home. Even with the slight rate hikes of 2024, the return on deposits remains negligible against inflation. This solidified the deflationary norm, a social consensus that prices and wages would not rise. A central institution in this landscape of frozen wealth is Japan Post Bank, known locally as Yucho. It is less of a commercial bank and more of a national vault. Japan Post Bank holds approximately 190 trillion yen in deposits, with over 120 million accounts. It is ubiquitous. Culturally, the post office bank is viewed as a sanctuary. While the historic full government guarantee was replaced by capped deposit insurance upon privatization, the deep-seated public perception of absolute state backing remains, making it the ultimate safe haven. But because it is a safe haven, it invests like one. The bank's investment portfolio is heavily weighted towards Japanese government bonds, JGBs. This creates a complex engine of stagnation. The people deposit their cash in Yucho seeking safety. Unlike the pre-2001 era where deposits were legally funneled to the Ministry of Finance, Yucho now voluntarily pours trillions into Japanese government bonds, JGBs, and foreign securities to secure yield. Yet, the result for the domestic economy is similar. Along with the commercial megabanks, MUFG, SMBC, Mizuho, which also sit on massive deposit piles, the immense concentration of capital in risk-averse institutions means funds are not being aggressively recycled into Japanese startups. They are funding the government or exiting the country. So, we have two systems. One forces investment into illiquid assets. The other encourages hoarding of liquid cash. How does this translate into the daily lives of the people? Both groups are wealthy by global standards, yet both suffer from unique forms of financial anxiety. The typical Singaporean retiree often finds themselves in the position of being an HDB millionaire. Public housing in Singapore has appreciated significantly, with million-dollar flats becoming increasingly common. But this wealth is encumbered by lease decay. All HDB flats are 99-year leases. As the clock ticks, the value theoretically drops to zero. This creates a time-sensitive anxiety. A retiree with a 60-year lease remaining sits on a valuable asset, but it is a melting ice cube. To unlock this wealth, the retiree must monetize the asset. The government has attempted to solve this with the lease buyback scheme, allowing seniors to sell the tail end of their lease for cash while staying in their homes. Yet, uptake remains low. Deep-seated cultural desires to leave a physical inheritance often trump the need for liquidity. Consequently, many asset-rich seniors remain cash-poor by choice. This drives one of the highest elderly employment rates in the developed world. Many seniors work not just for active aging, but to generate the liquidity their million-dollar home cannot provide. The Japanese retiree presents a mirror image. They possess high liquid cash balances, tens of millions of yen accessible instantly. But they suffer from acute longevity risk anxiety. Because savings earn zero interest, the principal sum does not regenerate. Every yen spent is a yen lost forever. This creates a profound psychological barrier to spending. Even though they have the means, the fear of outliving their savings leads to extreme frugality. They die with the richest bank accounts in the world, living lives of constrained consumption. The anxiety is further compounded by cost of living. Singapore is one of the most expensive cities in the world. Japan has faced decades of deflation. Thus, the Singaporean retiree faces high costs with illiquid wealth, while the Japanese retiree faces lower costs, but is paralyzed by the fear of a shrinking cash pile. Recognizing the limitations and risks of their respective systems, both the Singaporean and Japanese governments initiated significant policy pivots in 2024 and 2025. Interestingly, they are moving in opposite directions. Japan is trying to force its citizens to take more risk. Singapore is forcing its citizens to lock up more capital. In Japan, the government finally realized that the cash hoard was a liability. In January 2024, they launched the new NISA, Nippon Individual Savings Account, a radical overhaul of its tax-free investment scheme designed to shift household assets from savings to investment. Reforms included indefinite tax exemptions and higher investment limits. The impact was immediate. Driven by the return of persistent inflation, which pushed real returns on cash deposits deeper into negative territory than seen in years, Japanese households finally began to mobilize their 1,100 trillion yen cash hoard into equities. Singapore, meanwhile, doubled down on forced savings. The Budget 2024 rolled out the Modular Package, which pays young seniors bonuses to keep working and contributing, payments that began hitting accounts in late 2024 and 2025. The closure of the special account removed the shielding hack flexibility, forcing money into the committed retirement account. The message from the Singapore government is clear. Solvency is paramount. They are steering citizens away from short-term liquidity towards secure, lifelong income streams. They are actively reshaping the definition of wealth from assets owned to monthly income secured. They do not want you to have a pile of cash. They want you to have a salary that lasts until you die. The story of the two wallets, Singapore's CPF and Japan's Post Office Bank, is ultimately a story of how government policy and historical experience shape the psychological definition of wealth. Singapore has constructed a system where citizens are solvency rich. Through forced savings and state annuities, the average Singaporean is structurally protected from running out of money. The state ensures that the asset exists. However, the cost of this solvency is autonomy and current liquidity. The Singaporean is a millionaire who must ask permission to spend their own money. Japan has evolved a system where citizens are liquidity rich. Through a legacy of deflation and risk aversion, the average Japanese household holds absolute control over a massive pile of liquid cash. They have maximum autonomy. However, the cost is growth and peace of mind. The Japanese retiree suffers from the anxiety of managing a finite, shrinking pile of money against an uncertain lifespan. This leads to a paralysis of consumption.